When Jesus died on the cross, many imagined that his spirit would immediately ascend to heaven, to be with the Father. That is what his followers longed for, an end to his suffering and the restoration of divine glory. However, what actually happened was far more mysterious and profound. For 3 days, between the dark afternoon of crucifixion and the dawn of resurrection, Jesus was absent. Jesus himself referred to it when he told the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man, in torment, sees Lazarus in peace, resting beside Abraham. Jesus, though dead in the flesh, was alive in spirit and descended into this shadowy domain, not as a prisoner, but as a messenger and conqueror. The Bible tells us that Satan held the power of death, and the mission was clear: to take back what Satan had stolen. Paul describes it vividly. Christ led captivity captive, an image that recalls the Roman triumph, where a victorious general paraded through the streets with his defeated enemies in chains. In Colossians, Paul says that Christ disarmed the powers and authorities, making a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. The Apostles' Creed, in use since the 2nd century, states clearly, he was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended into hell. On the 3rd day, he rose again from the dead. This phrase was included to counter false teachings that denied Jesus' true humanity, or that claimed his soul simply vanished. It was also a powerful affirmation that his redemptive work extended not only to the living but also to the dead. The religious leaders bribed the guards at the tomb to spread a lie, that the disciples had stolen Jesus' body. This falsehood was meant to hide the truth. Revelation declares that one day, even death itself will be destroyed, not simply to die for us, but to enter the enemy's fortress and liberate the captives. Catholic and Orthodox churches believe in a literal, victorious descent. Jesus entered Hades as divine conqueror. Some Protestant theologians see it symbolically, as Jesus' soul experiencing the ultimate suffering and separation on the cross, which they interpret as his hell. If Jesus descended and conquered, then we no longer have to fear. Death is not an end, but a transition. The door is no longer locked. The grave no longer holds us. The tomb has become a tunnel leading straight to Christ's presence. As Paul wrote, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. Not because death is sweet, but because the one who holds the keys has already gone before us. Yet all agree, Christ's triumph was total, and death has lost its sting. Because love demanded more than sacrifice. It demanded rescue. Because the chains had to be broken from the inside. Because the kingdom of death had to be shattered by the presence of life itself. And he did it. Completely. He didn't just purchase salvation. He went to collect it. In Orthodox liturgy, ancient hymns are sung that depict the scene poetically. Hades, personified, laments as light floods his domain. He cries out in horror, realizing that the one he thought he had devoured is in fact the creator of life who has come to destroy his kingdom. It is the poetry of victory sung through the ages. His descent means death is no longer a wall but a doorway. The keys now belong to him. At the final judgment, the sea gave up the dead that were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them, and after all are judged. Death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the death of death itself, the final destruction of everything that separates humanity from God. If no one believed in the resurrection, then the conquest of Hades would be meaningless. But the lie did not prevail. He stripped the enemy of his weapons. He broke the gates of the abyss. He liberated the captives. In it, Christ's entry into Hades is described as an eruption of light into utter darkness. Satan and death tremble before him. The letters of Jude and to Peter speak of angels who sinned and were cast into darkness, bound in eternal chains, awaiting judgment. These fallen beings, part of an ancient rebellion, were imprisoned. Christ, in his descent, did not offer them forgiveness. Their judgment had long been sealed. Instead, he announced their final defeat. He proclaimed that their master, Satan, had been conquered. The gates are shattered. Adam is taken by the hand, and a great procession of righteous ones, Abraham, Moses, David, Isaiah, follow the Lord into freedom. Satan, stripped of his power to hold the righteous dead, turned his fury toward the living. Revelation describes him as a dragon filled with rage who, once defeated, went to make war against those who keep God's commandments and hold fast to the testimony of Jesus. This war took the form of vicious persecution against the early church. If he could no longer imprison after death, he would attempt to destroy before it. His empire of death transformed into an empire of lies and oppression. It is a dramatic representation of the spiritual truth declared by the apostles. Jesus not only died, he conquered the empire of death. In Revelation, Jesus declares, "I was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I hold the keys of death and Hades." Keys represent power. They once belonged to the enemy. Now they are in the hands of the Lamb who triumphed. In Hebrews we read, "By his death, he destroyed the one who held the power of death." That is, the devil. This means death wasn't just a natural end. It was a spiritual dominion ruled by a cruel adversary. The Gospel of Matthew reports that after Jesus' death, the tombs broke open, and many holy people who had died were raised to life. They entered the city and appeared to many. This strange event was not accidental. It was a visible echo of an invisible spiritual triumph. The doors had been opened. The righteous were freed. The prison was undone. By dying without sin, Jesus had the authority to enter that realm, for death had no rightful claim over him. As he said, "No one takes my life from me. I lay it down of my own accord." These spirits in prison were not demons but human souls, who had died before the coming of the Messiah. They were held captive in the realm of death, unable to leave, awaiting the fulfillment of a promise. And now, the Redeemer had come. Between them, a great chasm existed. This showed that even the righteous dead were not yet in heaven, but in a place of waiting. And it was there, in the peaceful section of Hades, that Jesus promised the repentant thief on the cross, "Today you will be with me in paradise," a paradise of rest and hope, but still under the power of death. His body lay lifeless in the tomb, but his spirit had descended into an invisible place, a forgotten realm, the domain of the dead. This time between death and resurrection is surrounded by mystery. Few realize that the scriptures, in various passages, mention that Jesus did not go directly to the Father, but first ascended. In Matthew, he himself prophesied that the Son of Man would spend 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The Apostle Paul, in Ephesians, states that Christ descended into the lower regions of the earth before rising again. These texts aren't symbolic. They are direct declarations that something essential occurred during those 3 days, something that had always been part of God's plan of redemption. But where exactly did Jesus go? And what did he do there? The answer lies hidden beneath layers of ancient biblical language. The place he went to was known as Sheol in the Hebrew Old Testament and Hades in the Greek New Testament. Unlike the modern concept of hell as a fiery place of eternal torment, Sheol or Hades was understood as the realm where all the dead went to wait. It was a kingdom divided. On one side were the righteous, in a place of peace sometimes called Abraham's bosom, and on the other side, the unrighteous, in anguish, awaiting judgment. This understanding was common among the Jews during Jesus' time. When Peter writes that Christ preached to the spirits in prison, he refers to this moment. But Jesus' descent was not a peaceful visit. It was an invasion into enemy territory. The cross was the gateway. Death was the method of entry. That victory wasn't symbolic. It was real, spiritual, and complete. A sign